Well, good morning. Thank y'all for being here today. Wanted to kind of recap the session and then answer whatever questions y'all have. I guess the first thing I want to say is how grateful we are that we had a session that didn't involve any major outbreak of COVID. I know there was discussion back in January about whether we should extend the session or delay, I guess. And we pushed forward, felt like it was the right thing to do for the citizens of the state. We wanted to make sure that we got the work done. As we make an effort to push back to normalcy, we felt like it was our job to push forward as well. And thanks to the Lord, He's been very gracious to us to prevent us from having any outbreak, and we were able to get the work done. So just as a general comment, I want to say I'm glad we were able to push forward and get that work done. As far as highlights of the session, I guess the main highlight would be the budget, and I had a few points I wanted to make there about the budget. Obviously, revenues continue to be good, and we are grateful for that. This has allowed us to fund all our state agencies. It actually allowed us to restore what cuts we made last year, and so we brought the state agencies back to the same level as they were before last year. Rainy day fund is full. We had a few more highlights that I wanted to point out this year. Obviously, teacher pay raise is a big one. We were able to not only restore agency cuts, not only were we able to fill the rainy day fund, we're also able to give a teacher pay raise, which is a great thing for our teachers. We say it all the time. We can never thank them enough. We can never pay them what they are completely worth, but we do the best we can, and this is an effort on our part to show them how much we appreciate what they do. We will continue to try to find ways to reward them for the job well done. So teacher pay was a big one. Education in general, we gave almost 3% more there. We were able to do that. $25 million in additional educational programs. We did the early learning collaboratives, an increase of about $8 million on the early learning collaborative, which takes them to $16 million, basically doubled the amount we put into the early learning collaboratives. The teacher supply fund, we increased to $20 million. Now, it is my memory, and y'all may have to check me on this, but it is my memory that that fund is supposed to be about $24 million. Before the Republicans took over down here, that fund had been dwindled down to, I wanted to say, $4 million. It was the practice seems to be the practice of the previous administration to take money from that fund and put it into MAP. We have worked to make sure that that fund has been restored. We doubled it over the last few years to $12 million, and this year we got it up to $20 million. And I think the cap is around 24. So we're doing great work there trying to restore those teacher supply funds. We were able to do that today, or this year. Institutions of higher learning received a 7% increase in their funding. Community colleges got almost an 8% increase in their funding. Department of Public Safety is another area where we made some great strides and improvements this year in funding. Almost 20% increase in funding for the Department of Public Safety. This includes a $1.5 million for a trooper school, includes $100,000 for bulletproof vests. We've also made improvements in driver services, and I hope the people around the state see that when they go to get license renewals, that it's beginning to be a whole lot more efficient. This is a common complaint nationwide, not just in Mississippi. We all have had frustrations with driver services, but I want to commend Commissioner Tyndall for making a concerted effort to try to make sure that is improved. We did put more money there to try to assist him in that effort, and obviously we're very sensitive to that, and if anyone has problems with that, we want to know about it, because we want to continue to try to make improvements there. The Mississippi School Safety Act, we put almost $250,000 there. And then rural fire trucks, we did $2 million there. So these are some of the highlights of the budget, great things that we were able to do this year because of, I think, good conservative budgeting practices. We have made a promise to the citizens of our state that we would be good stewards of their taxpayer dollars, and we would not spend more money than we bring in. And while we've had to make some tough decisions along the way, I think we're beginning to see the benefits of those conservative practices. So This year, I think we have a solid budget, good budget, and hopefully we're putting our state back on track to where we were before the pandemic hit. I've said it often, I think we were in the best financial shape ever in the history, at least in my political history, before the pandemic hit. And because of that, we were able to weather that storm fairly well, and we're now on the road to getting back to where we were. The only other thing I would mention, and I'll open it up for comment or question, is the income tax. That is something we feel very strongly about here in the House of Representatives. For me, it is the number one issue. I've said it repeatedly, and I'll say it again. I don't know of any policy item we as a legislature could ever do that will benefit the people more or result in greater economic prosperity in our state than the elimination of the income tax. That is an effort that we're going to continue to work on throughout the summer. We're going to be more vigilant to try to make sure that we can get support on the Senate end for this. The plan that we brought forward received substantial support in the House, bipartisan support. Had almost 90 votes for that bill. It's been out there for about a month and a half, and there have been a lot of attempts to try to throw rocks at it, and the only objections that we find are not policy related. They're either political in nature or they come from those who have a self-serving interest. So I think the policy that we passed is a solid one. We will continue to try to address whatever concerns arise out of that and answer those questions, but that will be the number one issue. I don't know that there's anything moving forward that's more impactful than that. So we were disappointed that plan did not pass again. Don't know that we received any policy reason as to why it was bad. We're going to continue to try to address those concerns, and that will be the number one issue for us moving forward next year. So with that, I will stop and answer any questions that you have. Yes, ma'am.
Speaker, I know it was early on when we spoke out here the last time about that tax reform plan. The governor had talked about how he wanted to see the income tax phased out. At any point since then, have you communicated with him about how he could also assist in trying to get this pushed forward?
Yes, we've communicated with his office. I have communicated with his chief of staff about that. We've asked for whatever support they could give. I recall a statement being issued by the office. I can't remember exactly what that statement said, but it was the general nature of it was we support the elimination of income tax. It just didn't have any details with it. There was no specification, but obviously I think we all have a goal of making that happen.
Along the income tax line and a few other issues, some people are questioning whether communications between you, Lieutenant Governor, and the Governor are where they ought to be, especially on major issues like that. How do you feel about that?
Well, my office is wide open. We're ready to communicate. I've had communications regularly with the Lieutenant Governor. The Lieutenant Governor I meet every Tuesday morning and talk about the week. We talk about the things that are open. We meet on a moment's notice when we need to. I've had regular communications with the Chief of Staff for the Governor. He's very good to communicate with me about things that are going on. So I don't understand why people want to say that. I think all of us communicate when we need to.
Looking ahead, redistricting is going to be a big issue coming up. Do you anticipate that being handled in a special session or a regular session?
No, I think we will handle redistricting in a regular session. I know the numbers, preliminary numbers at least, have been returned, and they are beginning to look at those numbers, and that will be probably something we will take up next session, I guess, if I got my dates right. I think that's something we'll have to take up in the 22 session.
Thinking way ahead, do you anticipate doing that early on or waiting until the end of the session? Or have you thought that far ahead yet?
I'm sorry, doing it early on before the session?
No, early in the session or late in the session.
Well, actually it doesn't have to be done until 2023. I guess the elections are 2023, so we just have to get it done before qualifying deadline on January of 23. So I don't know whether it'll be early or late in next year. There's no urgency to have to get it done other than it be done by the end of the session next year.
You talked about this good spirit in the House this
Right.
past session. You felt. Do you think that may dampen that spirit some?
Oh, I certainly hope not. I think we've been able this session, and I will say this is something I'm very proud of in the House of Representatives this year, is that there did seem to be a good spirit of cooperation and working together. That does not mean we agreed on everything, but working with my House colleagues, there was a great spirit of trying to do the business of the people and stay together and keep our eyes focused on that versus political agendas and personal agendas and that sort of thing. So I was very pleased with the way the House worked within itself this year.
The Senate had spent a lot of time and effort on medical marijuana. Ended up not going anywhere. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, everything around here operates on votes. You know that, and there just did not seem to be the support for that in the House.
What would you like to see happen if the court does invalidate initiatives?
Well, I think we as a legislature are going to be forced to deal with that. If the court decides to invalidate the election that was taking place, I still think we have a strong statement by the people of the state as to what they want. And I think the legislature cannot ignore that. So we will have to move forward and try to find some program, some structure that will accomplish what the people want. And that's what we'll be looking at.
Do you expect to be okay on the federal COVID stimulus funds and dealing with those funds until next session? I mean, is there any immediate need that you think you're going to need to be called back in the session before?
We talked about that and do not see any, at this point, don't see any immediate need that needs to be addressed. One thing that's different about the rescue funds versus the CARES Act funds was last year was that the CARES Act funds carried a December 30th deadline to be spent. We don't have that now. As you know, the rescue plan gives us till probably sometime in 2024, I think, to deal with the funds. So there's nothing that has to be done immediately with those funds during the off season this year like it was last year. The only thing that's coming down with those funds that is an immediate distribution are those funds that are going to the cities. And that has already been established by the federal government. They have put those numbers together. So we passed, as part of the bill that we passed this year, it just simply says that when those funds arrive, they are immediately distributed to the cities according to that fund. So that does not necessitate us having to come back to do that.
And Mr. Speaker, y'all put the state funds, y'all had legislation to address that, right? When the state funds come in, they go into
The 1.8 billion.
Yes. When they come, they go automatically into a fund that allows the legislature to spend those dollars when we return in January.
Some of the Jackson delegation said they wish more could have been done to address Jackson's water crisis. What do you have to say to that, Mr. Speaker?
Well, I think one of the things that we talked about were the funds that are coming through the rescue plan to the city of Jackson. And we also talked about the 1 cent sales tax that they already get. We also talked about the 2018 special session, which gives them about $4.3 million a year in infrastructure funds. So we are looking at all of that to see exactly how much money are they getting currently and where's that money going, to make sure that I think they're going to get a lot of help in the rescue plan. So another part of that is trying to identify what is the problem, what are the problems, and how much is it going to cost to fix those. And we've just not yet received any indication as to exactly what the problems are and how much it's going to take to fix them. I think an analysis has got to be done by some engineers to make sure that we know exactly what the problems are and what it's going to take to fix them. And we don't have that information yet. We got to have that before we're going to give any money.
The feds have obviously kind of sweetened the Medicaid match money to states like Mississippi that have not expanded Medicaid, encouraged them to expand. Is that something that you think the state should take a look at, heading into next year's session and kind of see if there's a way to do some version of expansion? Or where do you stand on that?
Well, regarding the Medicaid tech bill, we put a 3-year repeal on it. So it does not come back up for consideration until, I guess, 2024. So the bill that we passed basically sets the Medicaid program. It's going to be what it is for the next 3 years. Now, I've been one who's been very outspoken against Medicaid expansion. I don't see that as something that we can afford. I don't see it as something that's beneficial. So, personally, I would not favor that.
The Senate proposed expanding postpartum coverage for women from the current 2 months to 12 months, and that died somewhere in the House. Do you know why it died?
Yeah, in order to do that, the code section that involves that was not in the bill. So it was subject to a point of order.
It should have been in separate legislation then?
Yes, yes. And there was an individual who had informed us that he was going to raise a point of order, so it would have just killed the whole bill.
Is that an issue the legislature should revisit next year, given that Mississippi has the highest infant mortality rate and one of the highest maternal mortality rates?
Well, I don't know that Medicaid is the answer to that, but certainly we are concerned about the infant mortality rate, and we probably need to look at ways to address that. But expansion is may or may not be the answer to that, so it's just something we need to look at.
In terms of criminal justice reform, parole reform package passed, the habitual package did not. Is that something that, do you think that there's appetite to revisit that next session? Is there room there to continue to work?
There's certainly ongoing discussions about that. Criminal justice reform is a nationwide issue. Do I need to move again?
Yes.
Let's step back. Sorry, guys.
Let me see if I can split the difference between these two windows here. Everybody good? Sarah, you good?
Yes.
Okay. Criminal justice reform is something that's a nationwide issue. The Justice Department has come down hard on every state around this country who is not addressing that. All we have to do is look next door to Alabama to see how they got popped for $2 billion in their criminal justice system. To give people some perspective, in Mississippi, that's a third of our budget. Now, we can't afford a $2 billion fine from the Justice Department. So like it or not, it is something we've got to address. And so there's been extensive discussions about how do we make good, solid decisions about those who are incarcerated and who are a danger and a threat to society, and those who may not be such a threat to society. And so the question is not whether we like it or not. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And this year, efforts were made through the passage of the bill to do some criminal justice reform. What you mentioned was one of those things that did not get put in the bill this year. On the House side, there seemed to be a lack of support for that, and so what we've got to do is continue to try to discuss some way to reach a conclusion on that we get the votes to do.
Have you received any update on the federal investigation here, the NDOC investigation? Do you have any sense of kind of where they are? Oh, the DOJ investigation in Mississippi.
I personally don't recall having gotten anything like that lately. I think my chairman of corrections is more familiar with that. I would direct you to him. I think he's staying on top of that. Okay.
Going back to
Anything else?
Medicaid expansion, 1 second.
Yes, sir.
The Senate says they're going to at least look at it this summer. Is that, I mean, there's been some changes that Luke referred to about the cost to the state. I mean, is that something you think that your committee should at least look at, or?
Well, we certainly are open to, again, I'm not open to Medicaid expansion. I am not in favor of that. What I know about it, we cannot afford it. There are numerous reasons that we don't need to do that. So I would not be open to that. Now, if we want to look at other ways to help, like Emily mentioned, the postpartum, I think we just need to examine other things. I don't see Medicaid expansion as something that is beneficial to the state of Mississippi. I just don't think the taxpayers can afford it. That's what it boils down to, is the taxpayers. It's their money. And I just do not have taxpayers calling me and say, we want you to raise our taxes so that we can expand Medicaid. Keep in mind, those who are the most sick, those who are the poorest are on it. The expansion is, as I understand it, is to bring in another class of citizens who are not in that lower category. This would be the next tier up. So I just don't think we as taxpayers can afford that.
In lieu of that, what would you do to help hospitals, particularly rural ones? That are
Well,
struggling?
that's just been a topic of great discussion, Jeff, and we're going to have to continue to have those discussions.